Homage to the Triple Gem. So, years ago, I was in Thailand. My teacher sent me to Thailand for kind of like a year away. When you're a young monk in the Ajahn Chah tradition, then usually after you've been a monk for 2 years, which means you've been at the monastery for about 4 years, they send you away to stay under another teacher for a year. So I got sent to Thailand, and before going, I was excited to leave the country. I don't think I hadn't really spent much time outside of Canada before that. But I really love the Thai forest tradition, and especially love the old stories of the Kruba Ajahns. But all these people who kept coming back, the senior monks who kept, at least one senior monk, and people who came back from there seemed to have like all this faith. And I thought, well, I don't know how I'll fit in with this. I'm not really a faith type. But when I went there, got totally transformed. And when I came back, I was saying the same things, like, oh, Thailand, Thailand. So Thailand in the 20th century had this renaissance of Buddhism and had many, many monks who reached the end of the Buddhist path, and many more who reached various important posts along the way. And as well, there's this kind of culture that developed there that was quite similar in some ways to the time of the Buddha. You kind of show up at these events and really something amazing. It'd be like, there's an arahant at the event, and there's literally hundreds of monks assembled in these halls, and all chanting at the same time. A very powerful place. And one of the aspects of this culture that really shone out, and that just kept getting emphasized over and over and over again, kind of drilled into the young monks, was this idea of putting forth effort and enduring. It's kind of put forth effort and endure. The word for endure that they used in Thai was oton, which does have this kind of a pretty tough sounding word. So there was a very tight schedule. You'd be up at you'd have to be in the hall for 3 a.m. and doing chanting and meditation, then alms round, and then coming back, and there was chores. There was this whole schedule that went on, and you have very little free time during the day. And then there was, again, evening chanting at night, and then the whole thing started over and over again. And so this kind of emphasis on kind of like effort and endurance, put forth effort and endure, put forth effort and endure. This was kind of the bedrock of this culture that led to so many monks reaching the end of the path, reaching the end of the goal. So this was something that always came through and was emphasized, and all the other qualities that flowed out from that, the kind of compassion that the Ajahns had, the way that the monastery was run, the kind of the inspiring aspects of the Dhamma talks, the inspiring aspects of the community. In many ways, they seem to be underpinned by this ability to really put forth effort to develop, like really using so much of the time in pretty intense ways to try to develop one's meditation, to try to develop the wholesome qualities in one's mind. And so this kind of development of wholesome qualities in the mind, it can kind of branch out in a couple different ways. In one way, one can be developing wholesome qualities in the mind that one enjoys. So it's kind of this development of wholesome qualities through things that are pleasant. Kind of one enjoys doing that. And there's another tack of developing wholesome qualities that actually comes through suffering. Kind of one learns to understand one's suffering, and one develops wholesome qualities through that. So whenever one first starts to practice meditation, there's going to be things that one notices that one enjoys doing. And kind of, I remember when I when I first started to meditate, I thought to myself that I should always sit with my off meditation leg. I'd started in Taekwondo, and you learn to use your off leg to become the most versatile, and you use your leg that you're naturally good with. In my case, it was my right leg, as the kind of like backup powerhouse leg. So I thought that I would try that in meditation as well, and that turned out to be a really bad idea. But generally, there is this kind of way of moving forward. One uses one's good qualities. One meditates choosing the topics that are appropriate for one to choose, the ones that one likes, the one that gels with one's personality. one chooses people to associate with that one finds one gets along with. There's this advice that I got from a monk who I really respected in Thailand. And the advice that he gave me was to try to find what he said, a Kruba Ajahn with the same charit to stay with during Vasa especially. So the same charit, if I remember that word right, means the same personality. So you basically find somebody who has a personality similar to you that you gel with and who's more experienced than you. And associating with people like that, very pleasant. I mean, you don't go and look for the people who you don't get along with and then spend time with them all the time. There's going to be a lot of friction with that. I mean, there are people who've done that, myself among them. And there's going to be unnecessary friction, even though both people might have, the best intentions. It's just there's, personalities that don't line up. So you choose the topic that you like. You choose the people that you like. Ideally, you choose an environment that you like. And you can't always do this in some countries. The climate is pretty much the same everywhere. It doesn't really change that much. Canada's kind of like that. It just gets colder the further up north you go. down to the south, it's few degrees. I guess you say a few degrees warmer. The north is really cold. So pretty much everywhere in Canada, you've got pretty similar weather patterns. But if you're in a country like Sri Lanka, you can travel 3 hours away and get a completely different climate. And so you can kind of choose the environment that's suitable for your body. Do I like dry weather? Do I like hot weather? Do I like lots of sun? Do I like less sun? Do I like cold? Do I like heat? And in places that are mountainous, you tend to have like more choice over the type of climate that you're going to get, because the climate changes the higher up that you get into the mountains. So one can learn to choose this kind of climate that's also ideal for one, and then put forth effort in these things, put forth a lot of effort. So in those days in Thailand, it's kind of measured generally by the amount of hours that one puts into meditation. It's kind of, there is this idea of quality and quantity, but generally if one is putting forth effort, at a reasonable rate for a certain number of hours, that's a good rough measurement. Like, how many hours am I spending on this activity? So there's that classic measurement that it takes 10,000 hours to become a master, 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. And of course, that's a kind of pretty rough estimate, but it is a general way that one can gauge how much effort one is putting forth. It's like, what am I doing during the day? What's the bulk? How am I spending my time during the day, right? Is it just 10 minutes meditation, or is it 8 hours of meditation a day? And that has a really significant impact, the difference in time that one spends on these activities, especially meditation, study, whatever Buddhist activities there may be. So, as a layperson, it's a lot harder to devote one's whole day to these things, but there still is a kind of rough measurement that one can take, right? Am I just meditating once a week, or am I meditating consistently every single day for an hour or more a day? That's a good amount of time. If one has a full-time job and other responsibilities, if one can put in an hour or more a day, if one can put in 2 hours, that's really great. So that kind of measurement is an important one in terms of the amount of effort that one is putting forth, and the amount of effort that the amount of the results that one can expect to get from one's practice. It does rely quite a bit on the amount of time that one puts into it, and the abilities that one gets to manipulate, the skill that one gets in manipulating conditions to get the best results in meditation. That comes from noticing cause and effect, and that takes time. Takes time to develop, takes time to watch. So one puts forth effort in this way in things that are beneficial for one, trying to find the right people to associate with that feel good, trying to find the right meditation topic to develop that feels good, that feels like a good fit, and the right environments ideally. Where's a good place that I can go to meditate? Ideally a good climate, but people may even find that different meditation temples or monasteries, or even sometimes different rooms in one's house, are more conducive to meditation than others. So better to meditate there. In general, you can go to the place that feels conducive. And so one can develop the mind through effort, through things that are pleasant, through things that are good, through things that one generally wants to do. And there's nothing wrong with this. In general, one tries to develop one's strengths in this way. There is another type of development through effort that can be quite significant. Can't really say more significant or less significant. Can be very, very significant. And that's the development of meditation through suffering. So we can know what our good qualities are by, trying to feel what works well for us. And what is our strength here? And then developing in line with that strength. But another way that we can come to develop and know our good qualities and eliminate our bad qualities is actually through suffering. You kind of keep getting knocked around by a particular type of suffering, then it's actually there that one has to put forth the effort, that one has to take one stand. So they're always emphasizing in those days effort and endurance, oton. So there's this phrase in the Pali Canon that kanti paramang tapoti tika, which means that patient endurance, which is kanti, is essentially the highest austerity. Tapa was this theory they had of austerities in the time of the Buddha, where you would generate this kind of spiritual energy by denying oneself like pleasure or even inflicting harm on oneself. So the Buddha says that patient endurance is the highest austerity. So when a difficulty comes up, some kind of suffering that one isn't used to managing, then the duty in regard to that is to try to understand it. Where is this coming from? Okay, what is it that's throwing me off again and again? And the ways in which one suffers and can get thrown off can be very, very convincing, very, very hard to overcome, because they actually deal with the basic things that we use to build up our reality. So I was reading a little bit of the biography of Ajahn Mun yesterday. I haven't read that book for quite a long time, but it was very inspiring book. That book and Patipada. And they were talking about a monk who got really afraid of ghosts. They were talking about sanya, this aspect of perception that we use to make sense of the world. We use to determine, what does this person think? What will happen if I do this? If I do this or that, this is likely to happen. All these things can be influenced by perception. And perception has a huge influence on what we fear or don't fear. And it's this thing that we rely on so much, but sometimes it comes up with these incredible lies and kind of this, this really excellent thing is going to happen in the future, and it doesn't, and the person gets disappointed. Or, this really terrible thing's going to happen now because of this, and, it never happens. And, few hours later, a few days later, sanya is back up at it again and churning out thoughts, churning out perceptions that create a person's world, and then one suffers because of these perceptions. It's kind of like a mirage. I think that's actually the metaphor that the Buddha uses for sanya. I've got a group of ants coming towards me. The metaphor that the Buddha uses for sanya in the canon, I think it's a mirage. In any event, it's a possible metaphor regardless, because what it throws up for us is not actual reality. It's not actually what's going to happen in the future, often not actually the meaning of what happened in the past, but it's the best workup we can have of it. And it's very easy for defilements to infiltrate that, but also very hard to see. So that's one way that people can suffer a lot, is the perceptions about what other people have said or done to them, what their future will be like, the potentials they have, and what's certain in their world. It's all built up around sanya. So if one wants to overcome this type of suffering, it requires quite a lot of effort to understand that. And this effort requires endurance, because oftentimes when a particular type of suffering arises, the instinct, especially if that suffering is overwhelming, is that one just can't take it, and one wants to do something else. One wants to distract oneself, which I think pretty much everybody has had experiences doing. And so long as one distracts oneself, one doesn't really see this cause and effect, and one doesn't see what it is that's causing this suffering. So it requires endurance to understand suffering and to understand what it is that's causing it, so that one isn't swept away by that in the future, so that that does not tarnish one's good qualities. It doesn't bring the mind down. So there can be quite a lot of need for this endurance, this kind of external endurance. This kind of, sometimes one will face physical difficulties, difficulties with the body or difficulties with external conditions. In Thailand in those days, they would kind of do it deliberately, like it'd be freezing, like it would go down very cold sometimes, like 10 degrees or so, which doesn't sound that cold, but there was no, you didn't have blankets or anything, and you'd have to sit in the hall in the early morning in this, fairly cold weather, and then go for alms round when things were fairly cold. And there's element of training in external endurance. One kind of learns to endure these physical conditions, these difficult physical conditions, and essentially try to be content if one has enough. That kind of training carries over into enduring these negative thoughts, these negative habits, the suffering that arises in one's mind, because it comes from various sources, and in order to see the cause, there has to be this element of endurance. All these aspects of suffering can come together in ways that are really insidious, and especially, as we mentioned, a lot of this suffering comes from sanya, this kind of very, it's a necessary aspect of the mind, but also very, very deceitful. It kind of takes a particular thing that's causing one to suffer in one's life and just extends it indefinitely into the future. You can't see any way around this suffering. But one of the really amazing things about meditation is that if one endures this, if one pushes through this, and sometimes that suffering just disappears, almost in a flash. And moments before, it seemed like it would just be there forever. So the main goal in this is not just to get rid of the feeling, it's to understand the deception, so that one is not thrown off course in developing one's wholesome qualities, and also so that one can detach from these things. I remember when I was young man, my very first meditation retreat, I thought I was kind of pretty tough guy in those days. I was, young guys do all this like athletic stuff and whatnot, and I was always pretty, I was all right at track, pretty good at sports and these kind of things. Not an all-star or anything like that, but still pretty good. Used to win from time to time. So I thought I was pretty tough. And I remember going on this meditation retreat, and there were these old ladies I was sitting next to. Some of them were like 60, and they were just meditating no problem, and I was just racked with pain, just this intense pain. I was the worst one on the retreat. I'd sometimes just bow my head and be holding my head in my hands. Just kind of couldn't take the physical pain, and also just mentally it was very, very difficult for me. So this feeling of discomfort, just physical discomfort, kept building up, and until you figure if you're going to do that for 5 days, the pain will just successively increase, and also the mental pain would just kind of build up. And then it was the very last day before the very last day before the retreat ended, last full day, something like kind of almost broke with the pain in my body. It just disappeared, and it was just fine to sit then. It was almost just like sitting on the first day. Maybe some little tricks that I learned, but it was as far as I recall, it was something more than that. Just this kind of amazing disappearance of this pain out of nowhere, when it was just building up. And also the mental pain that I had also almost just disappeared. A part of that would have been my resistance to the thoughts, just resisting everything, and eventually you just kind of give up. But there is this kind of amazing thing that can happen in the mind when one endures suffering and it suddenly disappears in ways that one wouldn't expect. So on that retreat, the chief monk, he was always the chief meditation teacher. He was always kind of emphasizing, you're capable of more than you think. You're capable of more than you think. And the suffering that we have, some of it can come quite strongly if we think we're not capable of enduring it. We think we're not capable of going beyond it. It's this is the limit of what we can take, and it's just going to keep increasing over these next X number of days or weeks or months or years, and that'll be as much as I can take of that. So it's good to learn to endure these things. It's good to learn to understand them, so that one can have an understanding of the tricks that the mind plays on itself, and one can gain an understanding that, in fact, the path that the Buddha teaches is capable of dispelling these kinds of suffering, and that one is capable of more than one thinks, that there is this way that even physical pain can just suddenly completely disappear, and mental pain can just suddenly completely disappear, even though it was quite intense moments before. So this is the power of persevering in the Dhamma, the power of persevering in the development of wholesome qualities. It's something that one can know when one puts forth effort. That's the kind of knowledge that comes to a person through effort, through endurance. Those aren't the only qualities. I mean, it requires investigation, it requires all of the qualities that the Buddha lays out in the Noble Eightfold Path. But what I saw in Thailand, just underpinning this culture that led to so many arahants, was just this constant emphasis on effort and endurance. Do long hours of meditation, don't give up, endure. And not just as a tough thing, because from these things one can find happiness, one can find ease, even in situations that would otherwise be difficult. And if one can, learn to do this over and over again, then the sanya, the perception that one has of these situations, that they're so big, they're so insurmountable, that can grow less and less the more that one successfully resists them, the more that one successfully endures them, the more that one successfully puts forth effort through them. This can become the basis of one's life and the basis for the development of wholesome qualities. A basis for the development of wholesome qualities. So, all of this is to say that the greatness that the Buddha emphasized, the great possibilities that the Buddha emphasized, they're always available in all times. And the teachers who've attained that, they show us the way. They show us the way through their life. They show us the way through their teachings. And they also show us the way through the culture that they grew up in and that they help to keep going. This culture of effort, this culture of endurance, this culture that leads one to faith, that no matter what kind of suffering there may be, it's possible to overcome it. And this is something that one can know directly for oneself.